Content and then admit all.
Right. Good morning, good morning. Almost afternoon. Welcome all. Come on in, take a seat in case you're standing while you're Zooming. Grab some early lunch. Come join us. Hang out for a moment while we get everyone in. While you're waiting, you can go ahead and pop who you are, where you're coming from today into the chat. And we'll wait a few minutes per usual for people to join us on Zoom. Wonderful. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome in this late morning, early afternoon webinar around apprenticeships. You are in the right spot. Come on in, chill out, hang out with us, grab a snack or some lunch, and we'll get started in just a few minutes. If you haven't already, go ahead and pop your name and where you're joining us from into the chat. Love seeing all the representation from all across Washington State in the chat. Good morning, good morning. We'll get started in just a few minutes. Good morning, all. Grab a beverage, grab a snack or your lunch, and we'll get started in just a few minutes with our last webinar of our RCAM 2026 Practitioner Series around careers and apprenticeships. Great seeing y'all in the chat. Welcome, welcome. Glad you're here joining us. Give it just another minute or two, and then we will get started chatting about apprenticeships and navigating careers and apprenticeship areas. Thanks for joining us this morning and in your early afternoon. Like I said, grab a beverage, grab a snack, and we'll get started momentarily. Okay, friends, we're going to get this going, get this show on the road. Welcome. We are going to chat about navigating careers and apprenticeships today. And you may know us by now. Hopefully, this is the third time you're joining us. But if it's your first, so glad to have you here. Welcome. And hopefully, we see your face again. We are the RCAM team, which stands for Regional College Access Managers. And we're going to go through and just introduce ourselves. My name is Melissa Kaiulani Pico. I am the RCAM, or Regional College Access Manager for the King County region. Joshua, you want to kick us off after that?
Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. Joshua Morgan Griggs. I represent the South Puget Sound, Southwest Washington region. Jocelyn?
Yeah. Hello, all. So right here, after Joshua in the slide here, you have Raul Sanchez. He wasn't able to join us, but he is our other team member. He covers the Northeast and North Central region, and he is based in Spokane. And then I myself, I am Jocelyn Ibarra. I go by she, her, ella pronouns. I cover the Northwest and Peninsula regions in Washington. It's a pleasure to meet you all. And then I'll pass it on to Amber.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Amber Goodrich. I'm based out of Yakima and I cover the southeast and south central regions of Washington.
Wonderful. Thank you all. We're going to do some housekeeping, of course. So we are recording the session. It will be sent to you along with the slide deck sometime this week. And we just ask that if you have a question, the easiest way to get it seen or to get an answer is to pop it into the Q&A. Sometimes you have to go to the More button to find that Q&A. It kind of just depends on your setup and how big your screen is or what device you're on. Um, and then if there's a question in the chat, that's totally fine too. If you can remember, you can use the Q&A. I also want to take a time to say that a little disclaimer that there should be no third-party recording. So if you're using an AI note taker or anything like that, we cannot have anyone else recording this webinar. We've had some issues with that in the last few months or so, so I want to go ahead and make that disclaimer. And then we just ask that you keep yourself on mute throughout the webinar. There'll be a portion at the end, a share out that you'll have an opportunity to unmute and talk if you so choose to. But just go ahead and keep yourself on mute so that everyone can hear all the information for the recording especially. We also offer professional development or clock hours for this webinar. If you chose that selection when you registered, after this webinar, when we send out the email with the recording and the slide deck, there's also going to be a form around clock hours. And basically, you would keep that in your files. And when it comes time to recertify, that's when you would use that to renew and have those clock hours counted. And then at the end of this webinar, we also have a short survey that we ask attendees to fill out. It basically helps us to see, what was most useful, what do we need to do differently, all that good growth mindset stuff. And for filling out that survey, you have a chance to win one of 10 different $10 gift cards just for your time. It's a short survey. So near the end of this presentation, we'll do a slide with a link to that. And then you have kind of the week to fill it out. And then we'll choose the gift cards. Okay, down to business. So we're here to talk about navigating careers and apprenticeships. So today we're really going to talk about what are apprenticeships. We're going to talk about, how they work. We're also going to look at kind of apprenticeship adjacent programs and other programs that are not traditional apprenticeships that I still consider in the same kind of view of apprenticeships. And I think it can be helpful to offer these kind of frames for your students. So we'll talk about that. We'll look at different funding options and what that means and how they can be used. And then some best practices, tips, advice from apprenticeship managers, apprenticeship program managers, as well as RCAM advice. And then we have a bunch of resources that I'll actually walk you through the site that they're on, and we'll kind of talk through some of those and what can be helpful for practitioners versus students, all that good stuff. And then before we start, if you are a practitioner that works with, that is familiar with apprenticeships, works in a skills center or a high school that has apprenticeships, you probably know that each different industry or field of apprenticeships is its own world, with its own rabbit hole of quirks and intricacies. So really, this webinar is meant to kind of talk about the big picture of how we can, how practitioners can support their students who are interested in this area. It is really growing in Washington State. There's been a lot of news articles recently about how much the apprenticeship field and professional technical field has been growing. So I think it's a really great option for students. And so really this is to help you give students an idea of what's possible and then lead them to explore more based on their own interests. I also want to say that when we do these webinars, I feel like practitioners have their own expertise too. So if I'm talking about something and you know something about it, that you would like to share, you can pop that in the chat, share with the group of like, I've worked with that program and this was a pro tip for that. So I always love learning from practitioners in the field and gaining knowledge in that way. So definitely always welcome additional expertise in the chat if you have knowledge of what I'm talking about. Okay, so apprenticeships. Really, what they are, I want to make sure we're all kind of on the same page. So I want to talk about, what that means an apprenticeship. When we're talking about traditional apprenticeships, really it's a lot of times called the original 4-year degree, the original college degree, right? It's really about working in that field that you want to eventually have a career in and earning an income while you are training and working in that field. So they call it earn while you learn. Um, they usually require a combination of hours that you're working, practicing those skills, and also classroom hours. And really, what I think the conversation that we're really going to talk about today is, students. I have a few fields of students that I feel like are typically interested in apprenticeships or professional technical programs. And I think it's a really valuable option and it's a way to really help them figure out their post-high school college pathway, right? I think we see two things. I think we see students who say, I need to start working and providing income to my household right after high school. I don't have 4 years to go sit in a college classroom and study. I have to bring a paycheck home to help support my family, right? That's a really common situation that we see with students. I think this is an ideal pathway for them to still be able to get towards a living wage, which is our goal, right? College is a way to help students have more of a chance of making a living wage. And so that's really why we're wanting them to consider different college pathways like apprenticeships or professional technical programs. I think we also see students who really do not learn from sitting at a desk for hours and hearing someone talk at them. They don't learn from lecture style. And that's really valid. They learn from getting their hands on things and working with things and actually experiencing it. And I think professional technical programs and apprenticeships are also a great match for them as well. Again, our goal here is, and I think for most practitioners, right, we're pushing students toward college because we want them to have a better chance of earning a living wage. And one of those college pathways, professional technical programs, applied degrees, and traditional apprenticeships all can help them do that and all have that component of being able to really start working in the field while you're also learning. So we're going to talk about some of those programs and how they work. I first want to talk about a traditional apprenticeship and kind of the pathway. So I have my little stick figure friend here that's going to help me out. And basically, this is our high school student, right? And when they get to 11th or 12th grade, they can, usually around 11th grade, right, they start being able to do skills center or even in-house apprenticeship options. I would say not every district has them, but sometimes they do. So this is how students can reach an apprenticeship pathway, right? They can either continue in this bottom track of, traditional high school classes and just kind of doing the high school thing, and that's great. If they have an option or they have access to a skills center or in-house pre-apprenticeship programs, that's something that you can help them explore as well. Typically, how that looks is that 11th grade, they're kind of doing like a trying it out year where they start learning some of the basics of that field or industry. A lot of times that you see in Skills Center or in-house high school apprenticeship programs, you'll see manufacturing, you'll see construction kind of trades like carpentry, woodworking, things like that. Or you could see even healthcare fields like some basic kind of medical assistant or nursing assistant skills, right? Um, so 11th grade is really trying it out, and 12th grade, there are pre-apprenticeship programs that are basically span the year of 12th grade. So that is an option for students that have those programs in their districts or in their high school. The ultimate goal, right, for most of our high school students is that they graduate high school. So whether that's through traditional high school classes or bottom track or the top track of doing that pre-apprenticeship program in 12th grade, they are ultimately all graduating high school. That's our goal, right? From graduating high school, then there also is the option that students who just did this bottom path of traditional high school classes, they do have the choice to then say, you know what, I feel like I am really interested in apprenticeship or more kind of trade stuff. So I think I want to try a pre-apprenticeship program. And so they could do that after high school. And some places call them academies, some are pre-apprenticeship programs. And typically they're a year long, so just like our in-house programs were the year of 12th grade. Pre-apprenticeship programs are typically a year long. At this point, with the amount of competition that apprenticeships see, there doesn't really exist an apprenticeship where you wouldn't do a pre-apprenticeship program. So it's always going to be the best practice that students do a pre-apprenticeship, and that will give them either a guaranteed spot or more of a chance of actually getting accepted into their apprenticeship program. It is pretty rare, unless you are highly networked already, that you would get accepted to an apprenticeship program without doing some sort of pre-apprenticeship so they can see, what you're bringing to the table, right? For those students that already did the pre-apprenticeship program and completed that successfully, they can skip right to an apprenticeship. And actually, a lot of times, even if it's at a skills center and it's partnered with an apprenticeship organization, which I'll talk about a couple examples of that. They are completing that in 12th grade. Completing their pre-apprenticeship program in 12th grade gives them a spot into apprenticeships. Krista, I'm guessing you're talking about data around um, taking a pre-apprenticeship program in order to have a better chance of getting accepted into an apprenticeship. I don't have any data around that. It's more of like a best practice. And in everyone I spoke to, there was never a time where they could remember where someone was accepted cold without having done a pre-apprenticeship program or some sort of evidence that they've tried out this work and are ready to do this work as an apprentice. So it's more anecdotal or narrative evidence, like a narrative data rather than quantitative data. So those that did a pre-apprenticeship program, they go right into an apprenticeship a lot of times. And again, if they did the traditional high school route and did a year of pre-apprenticeship, it leads into the apprenticeship program. A lot of apprenticeship programs tend to be 2 to 4 years. So when we talk about apprenticeships are often referred to as the original college degree or original 4-year degree. A lot of apprenticeships are up to 4 years. So it's not like a quick, I'm going to be in and out for traditional apprenticeships. There's a lot of on-the-job training or OJT, and then also classroom instruction, which is called related technical instruction. At the end of that 2 to 4 years, so they have a certain number of hours they need to complete of their on-the-job training and classroom instruction. They have to complete a certain, certain courses. Then once they successfully do all of that, that's when there's some sort of either journeyman for a lot of our trades or a certification for other industries when they successfully complete all those standards and they're ready to kind of go out into the field and keep going with specific certifications or get right into their career. That's really the kind of quick and dirty of traditional apprenticeship pathways. Um, what I want to talk about also is that, these other programs that are kind of apprenticeship adjacent in that they all have the same similar components, just in different amounts. When we talk about traditional apprenticeships, there's also the option to do applied degrees or professional technical degrees and programs, and also certificate programs, so certification programs. These are all very similar in terms of the student's needs. So I think that's the most important thing is thinking about what is a student's goals? Where are they starting from? Are they saying that they don't want to be stuck in a classroom? Are they saying they need to have like a shorter program so they can earn income, for their household right away? So what programs would match that for them, basically? So I think that's really thinking about what your students' needs are or what they are expressing, to look at, what are some options that I can point out to them that they have beyond just, minimum wage work after high school. So we're going to talk about all of these programs, and really I will, to me, they all are kind of in the same group in that they offer a lot more hands-on alongside classroom instruction, and they all have an amount of in the field experience that's required as part of the degree or program or apprenticeship. And I think, there's so many different areas now, especially with apprenticeships and, with the amount of growth that we see in Washington State. There are the traditional apprenticeships you'll see are in trades, right? Or in construction, manufacturing, things like that. But nowadays, you also see a good amount in healthcare. There's in IT, some in business, things like that. So there's really a whole array of different fields. And, when you add in applied degrees or professional technical programs, it expands those options as well. So I want to talk a little bit about, the comparison between traditional apprenticeships versus professional technical and applied programs so that you can understand how they are similar in how they have all the same components, just in different amounts from each other. So we're going to kind of do this comparison with apprenticeships first. They have the majority of the foundational knowledge is really on the job training, on the job learning, where they're going to work sites or job sites or working in a shop, things like that, working in a hospital. And that is like the main component of their learning, right? Is on the job. And they have a set number of hours they need to complete on the job. A lot of times it's around 2,000, right? I will say union apprenticeships are a whole other ball of wax. Union apprentices, once they're accepted into an apprenticeship, they may not and often don't have a job right away. And so their first task is to go on and register on the out of work list, register for unemployment, and pay their union dues so that they can have health care. So then they have to wait for a job to come open that can take apprentices. And that's often the union apprentices are kind of a different world than other traditional apprenticeships. And that you see that a lot in the trades and construction and manufacturing. The other component to traditional apprenticeships is what they call related technical instruction or classroom instruction, right? So all traditional apprenticeships also have some sort of classroom instruction where they are often taken at like a partner organization or a community college, and they're paid for by the apprenticeship programs. There's no cost for the classes or the instruction that they're taking in the classroom, but apprenticeships still have costs. And I think this was something even when I talked with some apprenticeship programs, they were like, well, there's no cost. And I'm like, well, they still have to pay their rent and living expenses, right? And so that's what I think, I think there's sometimes the language that's used by apprenticeship programs and trying to get students into their programs can be a little bit different than what we know for our students. So I just wanted to kind of lay that out here. Apprentices, they still need to think about how they're going to pay for living expenses, transportation, equipment and gear. If they're in a union apprenticeship, their union dues, which they need to pay, pays for their health care. If they're not in a union apprenticeship, thinking about how they pay for their own health care, right? And when I talked with a lot of apprenticeship programs, they did say that a lot of their apprentices also have other part-time jobs. So I think sometimes students have this idea that if I go into an apprenticeship, I'm just going to work that. They're going to pay me to train, and that'll be great. And I'll make a living, and that'll be great. But a lot of apprentices actually also work other part-time jobs to pay for living expenses. So I think it's not always the case, but it can be the case. So I think that's a good thing to point out to students as well to help them understand the living expenses. And we will talk about some funding options to pay for some of these expenses so that they don't have to work that extra part-time job and they're just focused on their apprenticeship learning. So then when we look at applied degrees or professional technical programs, which in the community college world they call them PRFTCs is the acronym for them, right? Or the code for them rather. So when we talk about applied or professional technical programs, the main part of the learning is done in the classroom. So it's kind of flipped, right? It's classroom learning first versus on-the-job learning first. But what I will say is that these programs, when it's an applied degree or professional technical degree, these programs, the classes, are specifically geared toward that one industry or career field that they are wanting to go into. So it's not that they're necessarily taking, you know, um, astrology or astronomy rather, right? Or, a random kind of class, but they're taking specific classes that they need in order to be able to work in that field. So I think sometimes that can be what students are looking for, right? They don't want to sit in random gen ed classes or general education, and they want learning that is geared towards something that they're interested in actually doing for a career. The other component, most applied degrees or professional technical programs also have some sort of in the field requirement for the program. So that could be like a practicum or an internship, some sort of intensive that they need to do in the field. This is typically unpaid, but not always the case. It kind of depends on the program and how it's set up or who it's partnered with. But these are programs are often more likely to be covered by financial aid, and so it can be supplemented with financial aid. When we're talking about expenses, they have the same expenses, right? Same expenses as the apprenticeship program for our students, right? So talking about living expenses, transportation, food, insurance, even sometimes gear, like if it's for healthcare or something like that. But like I said, a lot of these programs are covered by financial aid. And so that can help pay for a lot of the expenses that we're talking about, depending on the program and the student's particular income or SAI, their particular situation, financial situation. There are also students that work part-time jobs as well, right? So if a student is needing that extra support, they can work, a work study job or a part-time on-campus job to cover those extra expenses. So we kind of see that apprenticeships and professional technical programs, they all have the same components. It's just a different amount and different levels. And also, I think a focus on different industries, right? A lot of apprenticeships are really focused on trades, and a lot of professional, technical, and applied programs are really focused more on sciences, healthcare, kind of STEM fields, right? Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about funding. Um, and I want to say, this is kind of an when I share the resources, the hub site that I'm going to share with you has all these funding, particular links to all these funding on there, so you don't have to like worry about writing all of this down. Don't worry about that. And we'll share the hub site for you right here in the presentation so that you can, look on that yourselves as well. Most of us know about the Washington Grant for Apprenticeships. This funding is particular to traditional apprenticeships. So I kind of split them up here by, what they can cover and then also identity specific, right? So our top one is really thinking about traditional apprenticeships, whereas these three are really focused on it could be a traditional apprenticeship, but it could also be a professional technical program or applied degree. The WSOS scholarship is great for that. The Opportunity Grant, which I think might be a King County thing, but I can't quite be sure. And then WAVE is also great. It's suspended for this year, but I kept it on here because I am, trying to manifest that it comes back next year in the state budget. So I'm just going to manifest it by including it in here. Um, and then we also have funding that's specific to particular identities. So the Native American Apprenticeship Assistance Program. And then for our foster care youth, there's a lot of opportunities for for various funding options for professional technical programs and apprenticeships and certificate programs with the ETV, Passport to Careers, things like that. Also coming, might be this fall, might be next year. I would imagine probably next school year, so maybe the 2027 school year, is the Pell Grant for Workforce. And I don't know if y'all were on the webinar for that for with Washington State last week, but basically Washington State is just in the process of figuring out what programs would qualify for the Workforce Pell Grant, so that we don't really know yet which programs that would be. But we kind of know that they would most likely be somewhere in this apprenticeship, professional, technical, applied degree world. So definitely one to look out for. Okay. I want to go into just a couple of like tips, advice I heard, and also just kind of best practices in terms of supporting students. And excuse me. I want to first start out by talking about living wage. I think this is something that when I talk to students, they are like, what's living wage? What's that mean? And like I said, I think when I work with students, a lot of times my goal is that I want them to earn a living wage. And the most common way to do that is some sort of post-secondary education, whether that be 4-year university, 2-year associates, apprenticeships, professional technical programs, whatever that may be. That's really the goal for them, right? And I think sometimes when we center college, there's like this automatic rebel. Our high school students are in that age where they are like, I don't want to hear anything an adult has to tell me that I need to do. So when you're like, you need to go to college, they're going to be like, I'm not going to college. So I think for me, I like to talk a lot to students about living wage, ways they can earn a living wage to help them understand that I'm not trying to force them into anything. I want them to think about in the future, it might be great right now to earn, minimum wage and, be living at home, but you might want to like live on your own at some point in the future of your life. So, you might need to earn a bit more sometime in the future. So talking about living wage is a great way to do that. And I find that a lot of students don't know what that term means and don't know how much living wages is in where they live. So I work in King County, it is quite a bit more than minimum wage. And I don't think a lot of students, realize that. So I would definitely encourage y'all to center your conversations around, how can we, help you reach to earning a living wage eventually. Um, I think the other thing is looking at, what resources you share with them. When we look on the hub site, there are some that are more accessible. easier to navigate, and there are some that are like spreadsheets with, with rows and rows and rows and rows, right? Our high school students aren't going to have the, capacity to be able to navigate that, right? Their brains are still developing, so looking at spreadsheets is not always most accessible to them. So I think a lot of times if you have students that are interested in an apprenticeship or even a professional technical program, setting up an informational interview is going to be a really good option for them. It gives them some autonomy and power and responsibility over it, and it doesn't just kind of throw something inaccessible at them. Even being able to coach them on, like these, what are some questions that you could ask? How do you need to, navigate or operate in this, informational interview to find out more information if they're actually interested in that kind of work. And I will talk about this more when I go over contacts, but a lot of apprenticeship programs that I talk to, they can't come to college and career events at the high schools or, on site. They typically have, they don't have an admissions department like colleges. They're typically one person kind of getting students into the program. So they don't have the capacity to come to high school events. So there, a lot of times, if you don't get an answer from a apprenticeship program to come to your college and career event and they don't even respond to you, it's probably because of that. It's probably because they're like, I don't have capacity to do events. But what they are more than willing to do is they love for you to talk to them. So setting up, virtual meetings, or even if you're nearby, like in-person meetings for you to sit down and chat with them, they love to do that. They're really open and responsive when you ask for that. So that's kind of one good best practice in terms of students that are interested in different apprenticeships or professional technical programs, talking to the apprenticeship program, or even talking to like the advisor that works with that program at community colleges for professional technical or applied degrees would be great, or a professor in that program. Just basically encouraging students to do informational interviews to really figure out, am I interested in this? What would it mean? What would the day-to-day look like? What would the program look like? What would I be expected to do? All that good stuff. Because I think a lot of the two things that I heard a lot from apprenticeship programs is that this is not a quick process. Thinking about the original 4-year degree, right? A lot of apprenticeships are 2 to 4 years. And I think students aren't always aware of that. If they're looking for a shorter program, that's going to be typically more your professional technical programs, certification programs, things like that. But I think a lot of students think I'm gonna do an apprenticeship, I'm gonna work for like a year, and then I'll be good to go. And it's not a quick process. It's not a quick thing. It's definitely a longer process, right? And the other thing that they talked about often was that it is basically like a job. So, they are really paying attention to the attitude and the commitment of the students, and, showing up on time was like a big thing for them, right? Especially in the trades. I think they feel like that's an important thing for apprenticeships. So if they weren't able to show up on time for high school, which for whatever reason, like I'm not an on-time person. I'm like a plus or minus half an hour and I'm on time, right? Which wouldn't work for a lot of industries, and that's fine. I'm okay with that, right? But that's something to be upfront about in terms of that commitment is, they really look at and take seriously being on time and having a professional attitude. So rather than acting like an 18-year-old, they expect a professional behavior. And not all 18-year-olds can do that, and that's okay. Like if you're not there yet, that's great. What other options can you do? That was one of the other biggest pieces that I heard from a lot of apprenticeship programs is that they're really looking for, that professionalism, which I think when we kind of broke down what they meant by that, a lot of it was around the attitude and being on time. I think the last piece is just looking at when I talked to a lot of apprenticeship programs, they also said that they're often not included in the conversation around college pathways. And, in Washington State over the last decade or so, WASAC has really been expanding what we mean by college. And you can see that in how their programs have expanded. They have so much more funding around apprenticeships and around professional technical programs, and different CTE education, right? So I think we need to also expand how and what we are exposing our students to, and having them explore, applied degrees, professional technical programs, and apprenticeships, and understanding what each of those are, alongside our 4-year programs. A lot of times I see, look at 4-year colleges or 2-year colleges, and that's kind of it, right? But looking at professional technical programs and applied degrees within those programs, and then apprenticeships on top of that can be really helpful to help students understand all their different options. And even what is the difference between an applied degree and a professional technical program? Like how is that different? Why are there two different names for them? Things like that. So that would be the kind of the last piece, is to really include this option when you are doing this kind of college career exploration with students. And I'm not going to leave you hanging on that, okay? To do that, I have some great resources for you, and we'll go into that right after. Oh, right now. I switched the slides. It's fine. So these are some great resources. We're gonna hop into, actually, I'm gonna switch my screen share for a moment and go into this main hub site. But I also wanted to point out, we also have Create Your Future materials. So Create Your Future with College Bound was a career exploration packet that WASAC and CSF created together, with a focus on our college-bound students and career and college exploration. So there's some great materials there to help students explore career roadmaps, explore college, different college programs, scholarships, things like that. And then there's also, it could be a good option if you're trying to help your students understand different apprenticeship pathways. Apprenticeships.gov has some good fact sheets. This is a screenshot of one of them, where it kind of talks about different apprenticeship options and the growth that we see. And they have some educator geared resources. So I wanted to include that for you too. So I'm going to stop sharing real quick and hop over to the Apprenticeships Hub and then share. Let's see. Whoops. Tick a tick a tick. Here we go. Okay. So this is the Apprenticeships Hub. Um, Most of these resources are geared toward all of Washington State. Some of them can be King County specific, just because that's where I'm located. And sometimes there's more resources in, the Seattle area, things like that. Um, it has 3 different sections. The first section is looking at different programs, and these could be traditional apprenticeships or professional technical programs. And actually, WSOS has a great, really accessible list to search. You can actually search by college, which was pretty rare to find, like an apprenticeship or career and technical programs, where you could search by different colleges and see what programs were there. So I added that on here to explore programs, because it was super accessible and really nice to navigate. So I really, love that site. There is the National Apprenticeship site. What that one is good for is apprenticeships. They had apprenticeships almost like jobs, almost like Indeed or something like that, right? It was like a job site. So some of them there were apprenticeships that had already closed or no longer existed. So there is some follow-up you have to do. But they also had a good amount of apprenticeships that were directly with companies. So like Walgreens or different companies like that, where you directly go and work as an apprentice, pharmacy technician, and kind of gain your certification through the company. So I wanted to include that one on there because I think that's a great option to kind of dig into a bit more. CareerBridge also has a program search, and if you kind of scroll down and say search for education ideas section, you can actually search for just traditional apprenticeship programs under that tab. So I wanted to include that. And then construction pre-apprenticeships has a little spreadsheet. Again, it's not as accessible because it's a literal Excel spreadsheet on here, but it's a great thing to look at pre-apprenticeship programs to see, even if you don't have one in your high school, what is there in your area that that students could access. The city of Seattle has their construction apprenticeship guide that can be helpful if you're in Seattle or planning on doing kind of a construction apprenticeship in that area. Um, Washington Labor and Industries is really the area where there's apprenticeships. The traditional apprenticeships are registered, but it's the probably one of the least accessible sites to search on. So I included it there because it has, it's the legit place, but it's really not a great site for students to necessarily start when they're exploring. I also wanted to include some industry-specific sites. So Get Training, which is Computing for All, and Apprenti have some good IT apprenticeships or professional technical programs that students can look into. And then the Healthcare Consortium is a great place for different healthcare apprenticeships. And when we look on the contact slide next, I'll kind of talk through that. But the Healthcare Consortium, they are not as responsive because what they are is that they contract with different organizations in areas around the state to actually then run the apprenticeships. So who you want to reach out to is not necessarily Healthcare Consortium, but the nonprofits or organizations that they collaborate with to run their apprenticeships. But it's a great website to show you like what apprenticeship options they have. And then the community colleges have a whole list of apprenticeships and were really professional technical programs and apprenticeships or academic programs. And what's nice about this, again, is one of those examples of something that's not necessarily super accessible for students. But what you can see is that it lets you know if it's financial aid eligible or not. It lets you know if they are awarded a degree or not. It lets you know if it's professional technical or academic, all that, or if it's a certificate, things like that. So that can be helpful for you as a practitioner to be able to explore yourself, not as much for, students necessarily. The second section on here is all those funding options that I told you about on the previous slide. They are all literally on here. Every single one that I spoke about is on this section for students to explore or for you to navigate, have students navigate to. And then the third section is just an ongoing list. It's always developing of different terms to know that they might see when they're researching apprenticeships and they get kind of confused about what that means. And I did include slides on here to help students understand the difference between, professional technical programs and apprenticeships and how they're actually very similar too. So that's a site that I would definitely encourage you all to, I'm going to switch back to the presentation now, to look through, and even something that you can have your students, look through and navigate. If you're having them do any sort of exploration, it's a great accessible site for them to kind of look through as well. And then when we talk about contacts, like I said, definitely encourage you to have your students do like informational interviews or networking interviews with different organizations. And so I wanted to include some of the ones that I talked to. Again, these are mostly in the King County region, but there are usually Oh, it doesn't seem to be a link. Okay, I will fix that on the website. Thanks for letting me know, Krista, about the link on that. Um, they usually have like a comparable program in different areas. So like the AJAC for manufacturing, this is the one in the King County area, but they also have programs that run all over the state. So um, just a list of places to be able to reach out to if you have particular questions that weren't answered here, that really dig into the specifics of an apprenticeship, or if you want to set up informational interviews for your students. Healthcare Consortium, I mentioned, they partner with organizations. So in the King County area and even Pierce County, that's like Seattle Jobs Initiatives are the ones that run their apprenticeships. So that would be the place to reach out to. And and they are super responsive. So thinking about different people to reach out to and places to reach out to and looking at who's in your area. And even if you can't find that, reaching out to them to say, are there any similar programs that you all run in, Spokane or something like that? And then I also want to mention your community colleges are a great resource as well. They obviously house a lot of the professional and technical programs. And so being able to reach out to them, to an advisor and, ask specifically say, like, I want more information about, this program so that they're prepared to answer your questions about that can be helpful. Or talking to even a professor, like reaching out to a professor from that degree program to understand more about what the program is about. Okay, so I'm going to stop talking for a little bit because by now you must be so tired of me. But what I really want to hear, and we're going to paste this in the chat so that I can stop sharing and see people's faces and read the chat and all that good stuff. But I really would love to hear, marinate on and think about, one thing you still have a question about or want more information about, and also one thing you feel like you might carry into your work from today, whether it be a resource or information or things like that. So Jocelyn will post that in the chat and there we go, perfect. Um, and we can marinate on it and share out one thing that you have questions about or want more information about, and then also one thing that you feel like you would carry into your work from today. You can raise your hand, you can put it in the chat. Either way is totally fine. I can call on people if people want to talk, or you can also put it in the chat, and that's perfectly acceptable too. Yeah, so data on long-term job security with students with a degree versus a certificate program in the trades. That's a great question to figure out what does that data look like and what does that mean? I love that. That's a great like follow-up thing to look at. Yeah. Lori, you have your hand raised. What are you thinking?
Well, since I get the mouse to work correctly for me, I can maneuver. So just to clarify on all of those lovely areas of funding, and I saw a lot of high schools on here. I'm a community college. You used the opportunity grant, and I am an opportunity grant specialist at my college, which is down in
Oh,
Southwest
perfect.
Washington. Excuse me. And the opportunity grant, if you're talking about the one I think you are, which is state dollars,
Yeah.
it funds the professional technical path, the AAS or the AAT. Correct. I have no idea about apprenticeship. And so when I was listening to you, I was like, hold on a minute, let me make sure I'm hearing correctly, especially for all of our high school counselors and advisors. Opportunity Grant does not run through financial aid traditional funding, but is an alternative funding that the student needs to connect at that community college with
Yeah.
in those separate offices. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, and thanks for that clarification. Yeah, it's definitely not through like the FAFSA or the WASFA. So all that funding that I talked about on the funding page is not through FAFSA or WASFA necessarily. So and yeah, the opportunity grant is really just for professional technical pathways. And yeah, thank you for being here. I love that. And yeah, I've helped a lot of students apply for the opportunity grant to use the opportunity grant at community colleges. And so you do work with the community college itself to apply for that funding. So that's great additional information and clarification. I definitely appreciate that.
That said, we still request students
Yeah.
apply for the WASFA or the FAFSA
Yeah.
because different than other workforce grants, the opportunity grant can leverage as long as there's no room, excuse me, as long as there is room in the budget. So we highly recommend no student take out a loan until after having conversations because loans block grant monies.
Oh, I love
Whole.
that. Pro tips from Lori. I love that. Thank you so much, Lori. I appreciate you being here and
You're
offering up your
welcome.
expertise.
You're welcome. My other hat I wear is working with former foster youth and unaccompanied homeless youth and the passport to careers, passport to college. So
Wonderful.
definitely have had some come across that are interested more in apprenticeship.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, let's see what else we have. Pay differentials. Yeah, alongside, data around long-term job security and degrees and certificate programs, definitely pay differential. I feel like there's a lot of data around that, like around trades, like around construction and manufacturing, but not other fields, right? Not necessarily, I don't know, healthcare or IT or things like that. So that'd definitely be interesting to look at the pay differential. Yeah. Is there state level policies to support students going through pre-apprenticeship programs and having a direct transfer to apprenticeship programs for 2 to 4 year programs, or their credits transferring? Um, State level policies. I guess I would need to hear more about what you're thinking about with that question. If you feel like either writing more or unmuting and talking at all.
I can unmute. Um,
Okay, thank
I
you.
guess my question is like if a student at their high school or in the community going through a pre-apprenticeship program, like is there a direct transfer to the apprenticeship program? Does that currently exist? That was
Yeah,
my
that's a
question.
great question. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so it depends, is all good answers, right? It depends. So for example, like JATC, the manufacturing, they have a manufacturing academy that's a pre-apprenticeship program directly in their organization, and it's free for students. It doesn't cost, they use like different grant funding, so that doesn't cost for students, but students still have to support themselves, like their own living expenses and things like that. If they go to their manufacturing academy, then they do have a very clear line to just going directly into an apprenticeship as long as they successfully complete the manufacturing academy, right? And the same thing like JATC, they have a lot of partnerships with skill centers at different school districts rather, where students would go directly from successfully completing the pre-apprenticeship to going right into an apprenticeship program. But that's not always the case. So someone like the ANU program, they're in a pre-apprenticeship program in the King County area, and but they don't necessarily can't guarantee that someone gets into an apprenticeship, right? They're trying to set students up for that and anyone up. It's not just young people, but really anyone of any age can do their pre-apprenticeship program. And so they're helping you with like math skills and the like pre-level things that you need to get in place in order to apply for the apprenticeship. But they can't guarantee that anyone gets into an apprenticeship. They're really to help you leverage your chances by doing a pre-apprenticeship program. So it really depends on if they're doing a pre-apprenticeship program directly with the organization that has the apprenticeship, then usually it's a yes. They are kind of guaranteed a direct transfer. But if they're doing a pre-apprenticeship program that is not directly with that apprenticeship, then usually it kind of depends. Yeah, great question. Yeah, no problem. Other share outs, I know we've kind of gone into like share out and question, but other things that you're thinking, anything that was helpful that you would carry into your work with your students? Yeah, great. So Rebecca was saying, talking with students about living wage. Krista, I don't know that there is a list of guaranteed placements. It's hard to even get a list of of the programs, let alone which ones are guaranteed placements. So I don't think that does exist. Yeah. Question from earlier. Thanks, Amber. Makes me wonder if we are sharing with students that the applied degree will give students job security versus a certificated program, thinking about long term. That's a great question. Yeah. Or in a great point of like talking to students about that. Again, I think talking about those aspects and also understanding where students are at, because even knowing that some students may say, I just can't do, an applied degree for 2 years. I need something that's a year right now. And that's, okay, fair. Like, let's look at that and you can think about these things for later on as well. Um, but I agree that I think, along with living wage, thinking about job security for different programs and, you know, talking about like wage earning in different types of programs as well that others commented on would be great to have more info about. The website is super helpful to share. Perfect. Yeah, I'm so glad. Yeah, that's something that I've just kind of been putting together and I think it could be helpful to have more resources for students around like help navigating apprenticeships and even looking at options around professional, technical, and certificate programs, definitely. Other things that you feel like you would carry into your work with students. We've heard about the resources, talking about living wage, talking about just general info around apprenticeships and the professional technical programs. Yeah, okay. So a question from earlier, is RTI a newer or more accurate term than RSI? We've always referred to it as RSI and what I think was in the art system in past years. I think they're interchangeable. I think some use RTI and some use RSI. Maybe one's newer than the other. I wouldn't have enough information or experience to know that. A lot of the ones that I talked to was RTI, so I just kind of utilized that term. But I think that's always great to point out that, there can be multiple terms, right? We always have jargon. We always have more than one jargon for something. So, yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I think they are interchangeable. Yes, so much jargon. Okay. In addition to, you can definitely feel free to keep sharing out things you feel like you're going to utilize with your students. Really, the last thing I wanted to share with you all before you head out is the survey. So in the chat, we're going to put a link to this as well. If you have a moment, please fill out this survey. In the very first question, you choose navigating careers and apprenticeships as the webinar that you're talking about. And then it's a 5-minute survey, super quick. And if you enter your email, you can have a chance to win one of our 10 different $10 gift cards. And this will also be included in the email that we send out as well, the link to the survey. And then I'm happy to keep, talking about questions or thoughts, things like that. It was great to learn more about non-union apprenticeships and technical degrees. Thanks, Krista. Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad. Thanks for all joining. Definitely, if you have any other questions or insights, share outs, definitely you can pop it in the chat or raise your hand. We'll hang out for another few minutes